Drew, we're back.
Brant,
It's season 2.
season 2. Hey, do you remember when we ever thought we would have a season 2? I don't.
No. We just kind of got into this. I don't know. Are we doing a podcast? Is that what we're up to?
We're trying to.
This is really happening?
We are attempting to do a podcast. So here we are. And it's season 2 of I'm Listening.
So we're back with season 2, and we're starting off with listening.
Listening!
Hey, what a good topic.
We're starting off with listening. Brant, I believe that we have focused a lot of our energy on listening to things outside of the body.
Yeah.
We are going to kick off season 2 by listening to your body.
Listening to my body. Okay.
Who did we bring on, Brant? Who did you snag for us today? I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, we are fortunate to have with us today Christy Doucette.
I'm Christy Doucette, and I'm a licensed professional counselor
She is a licensed therapist out of South Carolina.
in South Carolina. And I use a lot of somatic-based practices with my work.
And she's been doing somatic therapy for a number of years now.
This somatic therapy that you mentioned that she's a professional in, it's working through those physical responses to these anxieties. When we talked about it, we had more questions than answers, which is the way it's supposed to be. But I've got a couple of questions, but I'm excited just to hear what she has to say.
Yeah, this season 2 going into this is going to be a lot of fun because we've got a number of topics lined up and a number of guests lined up where we are learning a lot about listening. And this is exactly one of those things where we have no idea what we're talking about. And and that's okay because we are listening and learning.
One of our values, one of our goals of this podcast is to learn. And Brant and I from the get-go have said we have we value the skill of listening. We are not experts in it. We are always continuously learning. So
Absolutely.
Let's get this thing started.
Let's do it. From conversations to the natural world to complete silence, so many of us focus on what's next rather than what is happening now. I'm Listening is a podcast that dissects the importance of listening.
I'm Drew Richmond.
And I'm Brant Christofferson.
And this is I'm Listening, a podcast simply about the skill of listening.
Our podcast is about listening. And we focused a lot so far on listening to others. We've looked at listening to nature or maybe how we don't listen to things. We've never talked about what it means to listen to our bodies. And it is a new subject for us. It is something we haven't really thought about. And that's what led us to you.
Well, this is a topic I love, and I think we're actually all more attuned in listening than we initially think. In my profession, I'm a licensed professional counselor, so I'm essentially a professional listener. And I like to think of like listening under the surface of things. And so when someone says something, I'm listening beneath that. And then the way I think about it with our bodies is it's like, what's under the skin? What's under the surface? And what do we need to pay attention to that we're pretty keenly used to ignoring? What led me into more of the body is, I'm trained in talk therapy. There's so much said through nonverbals. And so most people, they get talking, they'll tell a story, and it gets up into the head. And so we leave our physical experience and we can spiral about any topic, especially if we're amped up about it. And you can talk things to death without any change. What led me into the body was beginning yoga due to stress. A doctor, I went in for a migraine and the doctor looked at me and he said, you've got to do some things differently, essentially. And he recommended yoga. And so it was one practice that got me out of my head and got me starting to notice sensations where I was holding tension. And then that led me down a path within my work of pursuing ways to work with people that get them listening to their bodies out of their heads. And that is truly where I saw my own growth in healing really expand and where I've seen it really expand for other people.
I sit at home a lot and work, and I'm by myself, and I'm in my head a lot. When you say getting out of your head, what do you mean by getting out of your head?
Okay. Yes. So I want you to feel your feet. Like wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers.
Okay.
Maybe even close your eyes.
Okay.
And think about taking an inhale in through your nose and out your mouth. And a couple rounds of in through your nose, out through your mouth.
Okay.
And maybe let your shoulders settle.
Okay.
Like they're very simple things to remember that we are this multifaceted being. It just means getting out of the swirl, the repetitive thoughts, and coming down into this body, feeling your breath. Your breath is your life force. It's the thing. Your breath can calm you down. It can rev you up. It's starting to get in touch with how much your body is communicating, how much it wants to say, what it's whispering, and will eventually yell if you're not listening through pain, discomfort.
Drew, I think we talk about this in our podcast. We get so caught up in thinking about what's next, we forget to look at right now. And Christy, it kind of sounds like what you're talking about is how do we be present with ourselves? Because it is easy to want to avoid, right, whatever might be going on. Is that kind of what you're looking at, is techniques in being present with yourself?
Yeah. When I was starting this journey of trying to pay more attention to my body, I would feel the swirl of thoughts. And I remember reading something. It was some wisdom teacher. I wish I knew who to credit. But the invitation was to pause and like, are you actually okay right now? And I remember looking around. I remember looking at my surroundings, feeling the temperature, feeling the initial moment, and realizing I'm actually good right now. Mm-hmm. My thoughts were taking me far, far away. They were making a story. They were creating problems for another day. Mm-hmm. But in the moment, I was realizing that I was good. And so it is about coming back to presence. And the body, more than any other part of us, can tap us into that.
Yeah. Yeah. When you say that like I get centered into it now, and it really, I think of like perspective. It helps with that perspective a little bit. You go, I sometimes find myself, I'm going to go to a dinner party, or I'm going to go to a social event, and people are going to ask me how I'm doing. And I start to like preface how I'm going to answer that question today versus yesterday versus tomorrow. And my brain automatically goes to all of the things that are wrong. Right? Because I can flush those out because they don't want to hear that. So then I can go, well, actually, because what are you going to say? Like, hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm doing great. How are you? Or I'm feeling fine. How are you? You just kind of do that thing. But I kind of go into this like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. But this is right, this is right, this is right, this is right. So I'm not going to talk to them about all the things that are wrong. I'm going to talk to them about all the things that are right. And it kind of flushes that. Am I doing something like similar to that as I prepare for that question? Because I own my own business. I've got 2 kids. I've got a wife. I've got a home. I got a mortgage, car payments. I got 2 dogs. But like, I could find all the things that are wrong that I want better or that are not working right now. But I'm not going to answer it that way. So I kind of I process it in that sense. Am I doing that? Or am I coping? Is that a coping mechanism? What did I just do there?
I love that question. My first thought is, like, are you trying to present in a certain way? Are you wanting to present the good? Are you wanting to present some of the muck? So it's how are you wanting to present? But then it is also, okay, I can identify some pretty shit things that are happening, but I can also, when I get really present, there's some good stuff happening. What do I want to focus on? So it's, what do I want to focus on? And also, how am I trying to present? I would say being really present is you aren't preparing your answer.
I think we do that a lot, though, right?
She said it earlier.
We kind of do
She said earlier. She goes, I take that thing and I get to that next level, because it's like I identify what you're presenting or what you're talking about, and then we go one layer deeper, like period, right there. So in that simple act of me trying to figure out what I want to talk about or what's wrong and identifying all the things, but making sure I get to the right things I want to say is that surface level. I really don't want to talk to you about these things. I'm just going to give you this answer, but I kind of go through it in my brain. But that doesn't help anything. Now, it's a social situation, so it's not like we're getting into deep thoughts for the evening, but it's a coping mechanism that I have. And then but it does help me, but it's not solving any of the problems.
Yes. In social scenarios, that awareness to know to prep about what you want to talk about, that can be a worthy coping skill for sure.
So, Drew, you were talking about like in those social conversations when it's like, how you doing? I'm doing great. And I will put on that mask because that's how I need to present myself at that moment. Am I doing great? Probably not. I might be doing mediocre, okay, maybe not good. But no one wants to hear that. We get really good at pushing those feelings down or pushing them away because no one wants to see them. We were conditioned, especially I think as young men and boys, to you don't show feelings. You need to present in a certain way that you can handle the situation. And we get so conditioned to doing that. We're also conditioning, kind of pushing a lot of those feelings or emotions or sensations away. What are we doing to ourselves when we're doing that? Is that an okay thing to do, or is it not an okay thing to do? I just asked a really large question, so you can answer that however you want.
Yeah, I love all of that. And I think less of the duality of is this right or wrong, good, bad. I think that, I hope as a culture, we're undoing a lot of what we've learned as far as how we show up for each other. There's nuance. And also, I think it depends on what kind of communities we're wanting to build, whether that is work, whether that's meeting new people. Are we wanting to show up more from the head and more of the superficial, or are we wanting to show up with more depth and this like bodily knowing and this like fuller self? Living in this space of living more from my body, more from my heart than my mind, I notice myself showing up. It doesn't matter the circumstance or the invitation, who's going to be there. I'm showing up more heart-led than I am showing up mind-led. And it is breaking all of the conditioning and the cultural norms. Sometimes it does make people uncomfortable. But I'm wanting to show up fully as myself, regardless of if I'm with you or if I'm with a stranger or going to a party and I might meet a new best friend. Or someone that's like, get the hell away from me. I don't know. She's too real. I don't want to be around that.
But that's all part of it, right? You're going in knowing you've got that heart-led component. I like that. You've got that going into the room. If they don't like you, oh well. And that's not versus leading with your head of like, I hope they like me. I hope I make a bunch of friends. I hope I go through this and everything works out great and I'm remembered.
It can be a vulnerable thing to do.
100%.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to show up heart-led. I'm in the heart-led field. And I think it is as men. As women too, we're all taught to really mask the bigness. We're supposed to show up sort of like middle of the road. Mm-hmm. And that's why we show up and we're good. We don't even really want to be great with people. We can't be too enthusiastic about how good things are because what if their life is on the downslope? And so we're all just taught to like ride this middle line. And our bodies are like, our natural rhythm is far more of an ebb and flow.
You get into somatic therapy. Is that correct? Did I say that right?
Yes, you did. Good work.
Awesome. Thank you. What is it? How about that for an in-depth question?
That was
What's
deep.
your world? What's somatic therapy?
As simply, and not using any technical language because I'm not a technical language person. When I'm with somebody and they're talking and I can tell they're starting to get sort of amped about something, I'll have them pause and notice. Are you feeling an elevated heart rate? Are you feeling tense in your throat? Are you feeling a tightness in your shoulder? Are you feeling open and expansive as you talk about that? It's inviting in this bodily experience. It's connecting with the senses. It's the easiest way to tap into the body's ability to connect. And so it shifts talk therapy into this. We're talking, we're processing, but we're also communicating, letting the body communicate and share what it's experiencing. A tightness in the throat will tell us a lot. And a lot of us, when we have something to say that we're not saying, or we're feeling a lot of emotion, our throat will get really tight. And that's a sensation a lot of us have, but we don't know what it is. We don't know why. And so it's just, we're starting to listen to some of those nuances.
You make that connection to this verbal thing that you're talking about. and now you're making that connection to this human response. Once you identify that human response, now what? What's the next step? And how do you turn that into a healing process or a therapeutic process?
Mm-hmm. You actually give it attention. You'd focus either your breath there, your awareness. In general, we're taught, okay, I've got this tightness. How do I get rid of it? How do I avoid it? How do I tune out? And the body's just saying, just give me some attention. I'm not going to be tight long as you listen. And so, well, if it's a tight throat, I'll say, is there something you're needing to say to me or to somebody else? And then it will usually result in tears and yes, there's so much I'm not saying. And it will lead into more processing or more depth. Or if shoulders are tight, they're like, gosh, I'm always tense. I'm always feeling like I'm holding things up for people. Okay, can you take a breath and can we like let something down for 1 second? And the body's just like, oh. And then the spirit says yes.
It almost sounds like
Do those make sense?
yeah, it sounds like something like I'd want someone else to help me with versus doing it on my own. And I suppose that would be your role then as a therapist to walk that path with somebody to help explore that and what that means.
Yeah, we're also conditioned to ignore these things. And so until someone says, how is your throat? Most people are going to say, I don't know, haven't thought about my throat in months, unless it's sore. I think this is the part of this work and also the part of community and like conscious community is that we need each other. We go so much deeper when we're together and we're able to work off of each other than we are alone. Beginning this work of learning about the body, learning about what our body's trying to say, it's far easier with somebody that knows the questions, that knows where to go next.
You've said it a couple times about we've trained our bodies to ignore this. Is that coming from more of a social component, or do you think that is kind of a human instinctual component that we just keep driving forward?
I don't think it's human nature. I think if we were allowed to really live as we're designed, to like listen to our bodies and to be expressive, we would let things go. There wouldn't be as much buildup. It's a lot of our culture of we must produce no matter if you had someone you love if you have someone who died who you really loved, you get 3 days bereavement from a generous workplace versus the body's, I just got a shiver thinking about it. Like the body's time to process and digest and to grieve is sometimes months. And yet we have to keep going. And so we've learned to almost put it aside or to bury it, to do something else with it. And then maybe we can reserve 30 minutes at night to feel. And that would probably be generous. I think something I was reflecting on too is I grew up in a very conservative Christian community, and there was a lot of denial of the body, a lot of the denial of pleasure, like desire, even play. Like I've worked in a school for years, and in elementary school, and kids learn to be compliant and if they have to go to the bathroom, they have to learn how to hold it till it's a convenient time for the teacher, or we teach them to stop playing. Like these are very, I think it starts young. And so as adults, we have to keep relearning how to listen, how to honor.
Yeah, so we're conditioning ourselves at a very young age, and I can relate to that really well. And what do we do as adults to unlearn that or to relearn how to really just listen to our bodies, or I don't know, be open to others that may be experiencing something instead of, telling them, no, sit down, be quiet and listen.
Yeah, I think one of the first assignments I was given when I started trying to be more embodied in my body was to figure out how I wanted to play. And so that started with walks. And if I saw a flower I really liked, I would stop and I would make myself versus continuing to walk. It starts really simple. And I remember I was on a walk one time and I remember thinking, I kind of want to skip. Well, that's really weird. What are they going to think when they see a grown woman skipping down the road? And it was just this play with myself of, can I allow that to be? And I would skip, and I would feel so much joy inside with equal parts, like a little embarrassment / shame. And it's just this continuous, it's like learning to ride the bike again. Being with people in their big feelings can be a mirror back to us, how we are with our own feelings. So if we notice a lot of resistance, like, I don't know if that's not feeling so good to me right now. Like, okay, how can I be with myself a little more gently, more compassion, feeling those, whether it's resistance or like, I don't know what to do with that. How can we flip it back around? And like, that's the body's invitation. How can we be kinder, more compassionate? How can we slow down?
That goes back to that listening piece of slowing down. And our whole theme with this podcast is be now, right? Instead of people listened now, instead of thinking about what they were going to say next or do tomorrow or do all those things and not being present, you get lost. So if everybody could listen now, be present now, and some of these, for lack of a better term, exercises, and I don't mean that the physical exercise, I'm talking the things that you guys work through, brings you to now. And I'm going to try to, in my layman's terms, try to put this together. So you're stressed out or whatever it is, whatever that condition is that you're looking to help fix or work through is typically something that's external. You can identify that physical component to it, the shoulders, the throat, whatever it is. It centralizes you and brings you back to your body. You identify that, and then people work through that because it brings you into the now, and it typically helps getting rid of all of the other things around you, and it centralizes you. Is that the idea?
I love how you just worded that. Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of view it as, I don't know if either of you cook, but yeah, so when you're scraping the surface off of something, so like when the fat is solidifying, the grease is solidifying, and you scrape that first layer off, I feel like the body allows us to kind of scrape off the surface. What's the thing getting our attention it's just taking up a lot of space, but once you get below the surface, there's all this richness. That to me is what this work helps us do. And what's below the surface is actually more gratitude, more joy, more peace, more ease, more kindness with each other, with ourselves.
So as we were diving into our research, we came across an article, Harvard Medical School. I'm not sure what it is. Brant was going to Google it. Never heard
Harvard?
of it. No.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, I don't know. Some small college somewhere. In this article, this is from last year, so from 2023, so fairly recent, talking specifically about somatic therapy. They went into all kinds of other things that Brant had heard of and I never had heard of, but they really dove pretty quickly into these traumatic events. And I don't hear that from you. Maybe it's just when it's not there yet in the conversation. But I look at this like PTSD, grief, depression, anxiety. It seems to go to more of this traumatic, major impact life story kind of thing versus just being human nature. That's part one of my question. I'll ask the second part later. But what's your response to that? Is that really the nature of this, of what it's for? Or do you see this as that's really not a lot of the work that you do?
That's interesting. While I'm a licensed therapist, I don't work with diagnoses. If someone is depressed, I don't view it as a label. I don't tend to use labels in that way. And maybe the way I was sharing examples is it's pretty casual, but I think I am working with a lot of folks in those areas and those titles. I think working with the body, processing trauma is incredibly important. And part of working with the body versus engaging with a lot of dialogue is a lot of times dialogue can, and rehashing a story can actually cause a lot of the physiological, like re-traumatizing. And so I don't often have people retell the story. I'll have them relay some of the feeling, the felt sense. So there's that. And I think most people are walking around with depression and anxiety. Most humans alive right now because of the way our society is set up, because a lot of us are repressed, which is depression, and it's suppressing your feelings. It's suppressing what's happening in the body. And then anxiety is just this swirling. It's not just. I don't want to oversimplify, but I am oversimplifying. Anxiety is this out of the body experience. Even though they're very physical feelings, anxiety is very up in the head. It's very fear-based. The somatic work is vital for all those areas.
Of getting us out of our heads. Yeah.
You get your oil changed in your car every 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 miles, right? Why do you do that? It's to prevent larger mechanical issues or failures down the road. However, sometimes larger mechanical issues happen regardless of how many times you change your oil down the road. Do you see a lot of folks that utilize this as a oil change, as this kind of preventative piece to this? I just want to make sure I keep going in this really good mindset and heart set, for lack of a better term? Or do you see most of it as I had a mechanical failure and now I need to get back to where I want to be?
I wrote that analogy down because I love it so much. So thank you.
Nice work, Drew.
You're so welcome. I dabble in analogies.
You dabble. I think the majority of people avoid therapy at all costs, and it is because something major has broken down. And so that, I think, can be the initial reason. And then I have people who stay with me for the oil change. Like the big problem, the big reason for coming was the catalyst, and then stay because they realize when things keep getting flushed out, life is better. And I think that's the power of the body too, is there's more and more research around when we are flushing the system, when we're letting things move through, listening, things do not store up, stress does not store up in the body, trauma. We get this out, there's less illness, less disease. Do things still happen? Absolutely. But that's why the oil change analogy really works. We want to keep the system running smooth.
We focus a lot, I think, on just like physical hygiene, but when it comes to our mental, emotional, spiritual, taking care of ourselves, we don't talk about it often. I feel like things are changing, right? Where it's more accepting for people to share, like, hey, I'm dealing with depression or I'm dealing with anxiety. Here are some of the things I'm doing to work through that. What are you seeing as a trend of healthy things that we're doing in our society right now?
I tend to work with a lot of moms of young kids, and they are wanting to learn. I'm really encouraged by this, but they're wanting to learn ways to regulate themselves so that then they can co-regulate their kids. And part of that, kind of the car breakdown analogy, is that mothers are super stressed and they're reactive to their kids because they're reactive inside. And so folks are coming to learn skills to regulate themselves, which then translates to their kids. And I think people are starting to view the body, in this work at least, they're starting to view the body as an ally versus it's this enemy that's just causing me pain. We get older and we think, gosh, my body's falling apart. When really the body has all this stored wisdom if we will listen to it.
What I've learned from others, and I use it all the time, is, nervousness in your stomach, right? That is probably one of the more relatable components of this piece, of this therapy, of this connecting your body. Shoulders are tense. My shoulders have been tense only for about the last 40 years. So that's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. You're fine. I'm fine. But that, like, if you're nervous about something, you really can feel it in your stomach. Like, I got butterflies in my stomach. That's something that's very relatable, very teachable, very recognizable from a very young age. And my response to that is always good. And then I follow it up with, that means you care. So if I'm nervous about the play, if I'm nervous about the game, if I'm nervous about the presentation, if I'm nervous about the test, I relate that to, if you weren't nervous, I'd be more concerned, right? If you didn't get that pit in your stomach before that thing, it means you don't care. And we relate it to that sense. So I say, my response is always, well, normalize that. That's a good feeling to have, that because it means that you care. Is that good? Or am I masking this behavior by saying, well, it's supposed to be that way, so that's okay? Now go get them. Or should there be another step to that? Am I personally screwing this up?
No, you're screwing nothing up. I think as a general rule, there's a lot of validity to that when we get nervous, because I was nervous before coming on with you all today, and I could feel it in my stomach. It's like, okay, interesting. It's like nervous excitement. I think for some people, that feeling can be so big that it can paralyze them. So that's when we say, okay, you notice you really care about this thing. Do you want to take a few deep breaths with me? Let's breathe into our belly. And you'll start to feel, after a few rounds of breath, it will start to settle. I think it's a relatable knowing. It's because you care. And also, if it's starting to feel like I can't even think because this is so loud, okay, let's take some breaths. Let's go for a walk. That second part wasn't really answering. It was adding on to your question, but...
Yeah, I think, but what you went to was if you can handle it, great. Like if it's just a little nervous belly, then you can handle that fine, because it is normal. It is what's supposed to happen if you're nervous. You get that little feeling. But if it, like what I would say, like green zone is great. You know, I want a little bit nervousness. It gets me charged up. It puts me in my green zone. But if it puts me in my yellow zone, it might be like, well, okay. But if that little nervous feeling, let's say you're preparing for a speech in class in front of your peers, if that puts you into the red zone, then it's counterproductive, and we need to do something more to bring you back down into, let's dabble in the yellow a little bit, because we're probably not going to get to green if it's that nerve-wracking, but let's get you into the yellow so you can get through this. So I think that piece of it is helpful, and not just saying, just normalizing nervousness as a normal feeling, so then you're fine because it's good, and then now go get them. It's maybe paying attention to going one layer deeper and going, how nervous are you? Or what do you feel like? Is it helping you to perform, or is it hindering you to get there? And just instead of just me saying, that's good, you're supposed to have that feeling, now go get them, I'm generalizing their emotional feeling to it instead of saying, well, where are you on that? Do you think it's too much, or do you think it's just right kind of thing?
Yes. Excellent.
Oh, thank God. I got it. Brant, did you hear that?
You got it right.
Nice work.
Woo! I'm changing. See, Brant and I said we learned something, if not multiple things, every episode we do. That's going to be a habit that I'm going to change. It's going to be like, well, where are you on that? Is it helping or is it hindering? Because it's supposed to be there, but is it too much or too little?
Yeah, and I know one of the things that you and I were talking about before, Drew, was like, yeah, how far do we go? And am I making the wrong decision by choosing one response over another? And one of the analogies I was looking at was like when we go running. Let's say I'm training for a marathon, and you know, running can be uncomfortable at times, right? My feet might hurt, my legs might hurt. Do I say, okay, I hear you, feet, we're going to stop because that's not fun? Or do I push through it? In making that decision, if I choose to stop running, am I giving in and not, you know, being able to train for this marathon? If I keep running, am I going to do damage to my legs? Going back into that anxiety piece, I think for me at least, that self-doubt of like, man, am I choosing the right thing? Am I not choosing the right thing? And maybe that's my own psychosis, my own issues, but does that make sense?
Yes. And I think what you're naming to, and why I got into this work is that I was consistently second guessing my knowing, and I was outsourcing my wisdom, my knowing to other people. If my body was communicating something, I wouldn't know, or maybe I did, but I doubted it. And so I think it's over the years of building a lot of trust, listening to each of the nuances that our bodies are communicating. Every time we make a choice to listen, it's building this radar to know, okay, if I'm running and I feel pain, I have a pretty strong sense now of, I know my pain tolerance. I know when something's severely out of whack, and I know I need to stop. Versus, this is really challenging and I'm going to go to the next level and keep going. It's just this like slow building of trust within yourself. And that's the part of the relearning. We're all relearning to trust in here.
Yeah.
And it's not that you have psychosis, and you're not, I don't think you're that far off from the majority of us.
Yeah.
It's that we're all relearning to trust in here.
I love that. what advice do you have for others when it comes to listening to your body?
The first thing that I think of every single time is going for a walk. It's as simple as walking and noticing how are you moving in space, your feet hitting the ground, looking and using your senses, looking for what you see, what you hear. Noticing if your breath feels pretty easeful or if it's more constricted and like it's kind of hard. A lot of times people will tell me when I ask, they'll say, it's kind of hard to breathe actually. That's helpful awareness because we can work with that. It's just starting to notice when I walk. Do I walk like a robot? or can I like let my hands be loose? It's kind of just getting a gauge, like a general gauge. How tight and like, I don't want to use the phrase uptight, but that's the first thing that comes to mind. When we're starting to connect with our bodies, like how tight am I and where can I invite some ease?
Yeah. So it's kind of being curious about it as we move, being curious about our bodies and asking, well, that's interesting. And not so much to go be like, oh my gosh, I got to go back home and Google that because then what was that? But it's just that curiosity in listening to it. I've learned long ago not to Google my symptoms.
Yes.
So.
And I think something that I haven't really named in this is my driving reason to connect with my body, is that it's my easiest channel, out of my head, but it's the easiest channel to connect with spirit / intuition, our gut knowing, whatever you want to call it, which is that insight that is beyond what the mind can conjure. And the body is my easiest access to that. The body is just this, not just this, but the body is this mechanism to get present, to then listen to this part that's bigger than me. And that is, why do we pay attention to all of this? For me, that's the why. The body is our ally, and if it's communicating something, it's for our good, and it is for us to listen to. And that when we do, it creates this ripple effect of self-trust, which then opens this channel to really listen to our intuition and to spirit.
And if the body's our ally and not our enemy, regardless of its condition, and we don't know how to do that, we can reach out to people like you that can help us with that. Or if we've tried it and we're just not getting out of it what we think we should, there are people in the world that we can reach out to and they can help us with that. That was all 399 questions, Brant. Do you have any more? Keep talking, but we can't hear what you're saying.
Oh, no. I was just going to say thank you for being with us. And you can send the invoice for this group therapy session to Drew, and he'll take care of it. So.
Dude, you know that we are connected because I was going to say the exact same line. Like, thank you for joining us today, and please send the bill too. That's so funny.
I love it.
Because I feel like I just had a great session.
There you go.
But I guess that's the point, right? I mean, if hopefully that same experience transfers to the listener, because I think that is important. It should feel like, you should send an invoice at some point. So thank you for spending the time with us.
I love it. I'll look forward to a detailed log next week in my inbox to hear how you're.
Yes. Ooh, homework. Good.
Homework,
yes.
Drew.
I love this. Yeah, exactly.
You think she's kidding, but.
You know what? I got a few things. I'm fine. No, I'm fine. Everything's fine.
You keep telling me that.
Fine.
Thank you so much. We've taken a lot of your time. Thank you for giving it to us.
It was a lot of fun.
That was incredible. Brant, your takeaway from that, please.
My takeaway is taking that time to make sure that I'm grounded, right? To make sure that I'm focused and just being present. Because as we mentioned in the conversation, I can get in my head a lot, right? I work from home by myself, and it's easy to just be daydreaming or somewhere else. So taking that time to get centered and be back in the present is good. The second thing that I took away was trusting myself, trusting what
for sure,
trusting myself and what I'm hearing about and what I might need for myself, and following through with that. It's okay if I need to
I don't know, take a nap in the middle of the day, or if I need to go and take a walk, or just sit and stare at the sky for a little while. And maybe that's just what I need for the moment. That's okay. How about
She
you,
talked
Drew?
a lot about
Yeah, what did you
she talked a lot about breathing and going for walks and feeding the brain that in your body that just that deep breath and the importance of that. It's critical. Think of how many times, I mean, you probably hear it all the time, Brand, because you're so crazy, but it's just like, oh, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Well, what does that come from? Well, it comes from, it's a calming technique. It's a way for your body to come back down again and breathe. I think that's a huge piece to it. I love just taking deep breaths. Everybody do it right now. You're driving, you're listening, you're working, whatever. It's amazing what that does to center you and to calm you down a little bit, regardless of what's going on. What caught me with this one is that I don't even know where to start. I would have to seek a professional. I would have to seek resources to help me figure out what's going on in my body and listening to my body and how that can help with anxiety, depression, anxiousness, all those things. Yet I've programmed myself to ignore my body for years. So to undo that and to tune back in is incredibly difficult, but it's all right here. That to me is absolutely fascinating. And if we all, much like listening, much like the entire theme of this podcast, if we all did that just a little bit more, I think the world would be a better place because we'd be in tune with ourselves internally versus just being distracted or focused on external factors all the time. That's my crazy takeaway. I love it.
Yeah. I look at just having that conversation with her where she's listening to herself and she's grounded. That is something that she brought to us. We could do that too, right?
Yeah.
We can also do work to be our best selves. So when we're engaging with people, we can do that as well.
Yep. That's a great point. It's about yourself, but doing that with somebody else helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's tons of people out there. You can check out Christy's website. We'll have the link in our notes. And there's tons of other folks out there that are coaches and consultants and therapists and counselors that are great resources for this kind of stuff if you're looking to get started.
Well, we've got another episode coming up. We're going to do music part 2. We are going to bring in another expert. Well, what's an expert about music? She literally teaches about how to listen to music, teaching the skill of listening.
We have an expert coming in on listening.
Thank God.
It's about time.
Some might say that should have been episode 1 of season 1, but
Right.
we'll get there eventually. Yeah, so we're going to bring her in and we're going to talk about literally a class that she teaches that's called The Art of Listening. And I couldn't be more excited about it. So music part 2.
I'm looking forward to that one.
In the description of this podcast, you will find more information and a list of any of the sources that we used.
This podcast is created and produced by Drew Richmond and Brant Christofferson. Editing by me, and the I'm Listening theme music by Drew.
That's me.
That's you.
Brant, I will talk to you later, my friend.
We'll see you next time.
Yeehaw.
Have a good one, Drew.
Bye, Brant.